Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And if we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Mrs. Anderson, like to do roll call?
Douglas Wisdom.
Here.
Robert Siebert.
Here.
Robert Smith.
Here.
Frederick Swats.
Here.
Hal Barton.
Here.
Hildy Angus.
Here.
And William Martin. Daniel Rodriguez. Okay, everyone is present at this time with the exception of William Martin and Daniel Rodriguez.
Thank you. At this time, we'd do a call to the public. If anybody wants to speak from the public on anything that is not on the agenda, at that time you can come up to the podium, state your name and your address, and address the commission, and make sure before you leave that you fill out a form that gives us your information and give that to the clerk. Is there any call from the public? Okay, at this point then we'll go on to old business, to item 1, the discussion and possible action regarding the approval of the November 8th Public Lands and Recreation meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Motion to approve.
I second that motion.
It's been motion approved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 2, the discussion and possible action, continued review of the Kingman Field Office and Bureau of Land Management's travel management plan and proposed alternatives, and provide recommendations to the Mojave County Board of Supervisors, if any.
Chairman Smith, members of the commission, last week Supervisor Watson brought to the commission's attention about the alternatives. And so we went ahead and put it on the agenda to discuss that there are 4 alternatives that were listed in the environmental assessment that was reviewed by the Bureau of Land Management. And I felt it was important that the commission would be aware of the 4 alternatives. The alternative A is where there's no action. They looked at fact that they maintained the existing conditions, and management was an inventory would be maintained the current balance of use and resource development. Alternative B was that it would be the greatest extent for looking at resource protection, which otherwise would mean that they're closing of routes. Alternative C, which is the recommended alternative, is where they're looking at both emphasis on public as well as the impacts and base the route closures on that one. And alternative D, which would allow the greatest extent of the routes and uses while maintaining the basic protections. I did include the maps and the attachments here that just give an idea. I do realize the maps are very small, and if need be, we could bring them up on the monitor, but as right now, the Bureau of Land Management is recommending alternative C, and I'll leave it at that for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. One thing that I found with Supervisor Watson's comments was very valuable in that we need to, as a commission, focus on one alternative and put our whole focus onto that. And if we could bring that up, just so the public could, and do alternative C up onto the screen, we can get a better idea of the overview of what this management plan looks like. Can we do that at this time?
Okay, if you want, we can bring it on the screen. I'll ask IT to bring it up. In the meantime, if you look at the handouts, you do have the maps.
Yeah.
And if we could get, no. Okay, can IT go to the actual, under the alternatives on the environmental assessment, please? Or it might be easier if I go up there and do it.
Wow.
Yeah, if we could just zoom in, if possible, on one of the areas with a lot of the red in it, that's just to the right of the
Okay.
highway there.
Chairman Smith, this is the Google Earth maps that show the actual ones. This is not showing the alternative maps that we're discussing right now. Let me go pull those ones up. Yeah, we'll find it.
Yeah, sometimes this thing is kind of hard to find.
You know what? I have it on as.
There we go. Modern technology.
Seems a lot heavier closure than I'm seeing on anything they're showing in their office.
These are the actual maps.
I was just there the other day. I'm not seeing near as much of this.
I'm not real sure.
Chairman Smith, he's going to upload them real quick. And what we'll do is we'll pull up each one of the maps that's on the handouts here for the commission so that the members of the public are able to see alternative A, B, C, and D.
That sounds like a good plan. Yeah, we'll bear with that. And is there further discussion
And
from your handout here
And in the
now?
meantime, while he's pulling this up, I'll just add that when the Bureau of Land Management did the public outreach, this is when they're gathering comments. They went back to their offices and decided on the one alternative, and that was the alternative C. And in the Transportation Master Plan, it really doesn't discuss the other three alternatives very much. Those were actually discussed in the environmental assessment. They kind of went, the environmental document that went in. And that is what gave the Bureau of Land Management the justification for their decision-making on choosing alternative C. And it is those recommendations that in agenda item number 5 that I'll be bringing to the commission a little bit later on some of the areas that they should have taken a look as well.
Okay, thank you. Just while we're in waiting for this to come up, some of the stuff on this alternative C that I encourage everybody, and I've been encouraging all over the public to get involved, to get onto this program and make comments, because if they don't hear from us, they think everything's just fine. And they've said that repeatedly in meetings. The BLM has said that repeatedly.
Okay, well, we will just start from the beginning here. Let me zoom out a tiny bit. This first exhibit shows the actual Kingman office of the Bureau of Land Management region that they do oversee. The next exhibit. This is alternative A. This is leaving the area as is with no recommended changes. If you want, I can zoom into certain areas if the commission would so like.
I don't think we have any alternative with A, really. They
No.
pretty well stated that, so moving on.
All right. Alternative B, this is probably the most restrictive. This is the one where they want to close the majority of the routes.
Yeah, I think it was somewhere around 2,500 miles.
Right. And then alternative C, this is the recommended action of the Bureau of Land Management.
Now, if we do decide to concentrate on that, let's zoom in on that one, if that's the pleasure of everybody here, and take a good look at this. This will give you a good idea of what's going on with this.
Okay, here we'll look at north of their area. This would be north of 68, north of I-40. Now, if you zoom even more close in, let me zoom in, and you'll see when the red routes come out, those are one. On this map, they actually look more brown.
Yeah, they do.
If I can-
You'll notice the different colors here, the green, the purple, and the brown, or that's actually red, but the purple are all the limited use trails. The green are to remain open, and the red are all proposed closures.
And the indication is to limit it to what?
There are 25 different definitions for limited. If you could zoom in more on the Surbat Mountains right there, I don't know if you can catch that right there, Mineral Mine Park.
All right. These maps, Chairman Smith, are not very clear, and once we get to the GIS, they really will stand out a lot better. The purpose of this map, this is just the alternative. This is what the recommendation is. And the recommendation is on the GIS map, too.
Yes, and actually the BLM map's clearer than this. Not a lot, but it is clearer. But you can see from right in the Mineral Park area, all of that red that is there, that's a real historic old site. That's the old town of Surbat in that area right in there. It's just an example for what I'm glad that Mr. Barton was able to bring that to us.
Chairman Smith, when we bring up the GIS for the members of the public, that will show it in very good definition. This, more or less, this presentation is just the 4 alternatives that the Bureau of Land Management looked at.
Okay?
And proposed alternative D is a lot more loose with a lot more routes they are recommended to leave open. So, do you mind, any further questions on this one, or should we move on?
I have one hand up in the back.
Okay.
If you'd like to come up and address what your concern is here.
My name is Terry Grant. I live at 2559 Camino del Rio in Bullhead City. I have 4 properties in Bullhead City. I want to know why we have to close any roads anywhere. And mines, I want to know that too. I have 2 parts of the story. Why do we have to close anything?
Can I refer to you, Mr. Barton?
Absolutely. I'd like to point out, first of all, Mojave County is not, this is not Mojave County closing. This is the Bureau of Land Management that oversees all the public lands within this region.
I understand that.
Yes, this is their recommendation to close specific routes. It is based on a transportation master plan that they have composed that is required by federal statute that they have to have. And This is a concern that was brought to the Board of Supervisors in September, and the board recognized the concern and immediately formed this commission to review the proposed actions and to forward on recommendations back to the board that they could make on to the Bureau of Land Management regarding this document.
Yeah, I don't think I got the answer I'm looking for. I don't know why we have to close any of it. Any of the mines, any of the roads. It's going to hurt us.
And here again, this is questions that we have asked the Bureau of Land Management. They're recommended these closures based on an analysis.
Where are they? Are they here?
They were here last week.
They're not here right now, so why are we here?
We are here to review the routes and the closures that they're recommended and come out with our proposed recommendations to them of what routes should remain open.
It makes no sense to me to close any roads. And obviously, they haven't had to take care of them. None of the roads are taken care of, and we don't want them taken care of. We want to be able to off-road on them and leave them as they are. So leave them as they are, don't close any of them, and we'll all go happy days.
Thank you for your comment.
If I, there. In the last press release from BLM about this particular situation, they are accepting written comments, and they are accepting comments on particular plans. In the previous comment periods, they were only accepting clicking on the map, nothing else. But they are now accepting written comments both by email and by mail. I don't have the addresses on me at the moment, but they are accepting comments in writing, so you can say that you prefer one plan over another, which is not something that was done in the first comment period.
Thank you, Mr. Swats, and yes, that is correct. And if you do look at BLM's documents, and that has been brought to our attention through BLM, that it is not their intent to close trails. They have said that numerous times in public meetings. Their documents have bullet points that put it out. And what we're here to do is get them aware, us, the public, get BLM aware that we're concerned about this. And as Mr. Swat said, the more comments we make, the more information we give them, the better for us, because if they do have the information, then they have something more to work off of. Anything further?
Chairman Smith, may I make a comment?
Supervisor Angus?
Thank you. And just to add on to your last comment, the purpose of this advisory committee is to bring
Okay,
forward...
Supervisor Angus, we can't hear you.
Hear me now?
Much better.
Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to add on, just for the record, so the people in the audience will know, the reason for this advisory committee is to come up with the final comments for BLM on the travel management plan that will go before the Board of Supervisors at our next meeting, which is Monday. So I just wanted to put that in because that's the purpose of this commission right now.
Thank you, Supervisor Angus, for enlightening us. Thank you. Any further comments on item 2?
Yeah, I would like to make a comment. When we work with the BLM, we're from Bullhead Four Wheelers. When we work with them, we sat down with Matt Driscoll, and the logic that was presented to us in that meeting with Matt Driscoll for closing any of these roads was sometimes it's parallel to another road, and they're just it was a redundant road. But when we sat down, it was a 6-hour meeting we had with them going through these different trails. If we presented any kind of logic at all that said, yes, that's true, that is parallel to the other trail, but this is why we want that other one opened up. He was very accepting to the ideas. So that just to me reinforces that all of us here don't want to see any trails closed. What we need to do is start getting vocal with the BLM, make comments, and let them know, pick one of these red trails that's on say, proposal alternative C, and provide them with a comment. Let them know, hey, this does get used. And this is going to be a battle to get all these trails to stay open. So what I'm trying to say is I could fault their logic for why they're coming up with some of these closed trails, but I kind of defend that when you present them with a reason, they'll change it. And I guess my plea is that everybody goes online and sees and take a look at that stuff. If you got a reason for why some of these red trails should not be closed, get on there and be vocal about it. I guess that's part of item 2. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Commissioner Siebert. Anybody else want to have any say? Okay.
Hi, Robin Dykstra, 2000 Ramar Road in Bullhead City. I'm here with our club, the Desert Riders, and we go out across the road from us and ride quite often. We're concerned about the roads being closed, and concerned at this point that once the roads start being closed, then every year there'll be a few more roads that are closed and a few more roads that close. It's pretty typical how the government operates. They will come in and easy and think it's going to be not much of a heartache for anybody, and at that point, years from now, then there'll be more and more roads closed. My recommendation to you to recommend to the BLM would be alternative A, to do nothing. There's really nothing to tear up out there. There's roads, there's dirt, there's plenty of wilderness area that's already protected. It's mostly dirt and rocks. I'm just concerned that once we open this bag, that the BLM will pretty much take control of it and start restricting use on that. There's many roads out there that come and go. The river washes the gravel in and the sand in, and that road goes away. The next year you might not have the rain and the downpours, and you got a new trail. So they do come and go by themselves, and they don't really need much of any kind of maintenance. They're just old mining roads is what they are. The mines that are up there, most of them have barbed wire or some kind of marking on them. It's pretty hard to miss them, and the mines I'm familiar with, you're certainly not going to drive into them. One of the issues that has come up was the liability for people running into these mines or driving their machines into the mines or falling in their mines. It doesn't really matter if you're walking or riding a machine or horseback if you're back there. It's your own responsibility to take care of yourself. We can't be having a babysitter saying this is too dangerous for you guys to go out there. We have to protect you guys. One suggestion I have, if there's a liability issue, that we should get a decal or a sticker, and everybody needs to sign up to go out on BLM land saying, I agree to accept all the liability for myself and my own actions. This could be done by signing a form similar to what you would do if you went to an amusement park and you accept all liabilities if that ride fails. And so my recommendation to you and to go to the board, to commissioners and BLM, would be alternative A, and to not pursue this any further and just let it die. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Bowen?
Jim Bowen, Havasu Four-Wheelers, Lake Havasu City. I'm also going to be on this, except I'm tardy in my paperwork, so I'm not up there yet. The one thing I think that could help everyone understand a little bit better, and that is that if the BLM had changed one word when they put these maps up here, I think it would be much more explanatory for everyone. And that is that I certainly am not an expert in this, but our club, the Havasu Four-Wheelers, with about 450 members and about 25 families, I have personally been involved in the travel management plan now since 2000, okay? When we first started working with BLM down in the Havasu area. And then they called our club and asked, would you come up to the Wallapies? Would you help us up here? Because we had quite a few individuals that were quite proficient with the GPS, and they needed them GPSed and then turned into them. Now, the problem that I had when they had their public meetings and they put the maps out on the easels, when you look at these maps up here, you realize, wow, that is really difficult to figure out. Then you look at the red lines and you see those things labeled as closed. That alone right there is a red flag to everybody. They all of a sudden go, oh my gosh, they're going to close 1,600 miles of those things? Okay, let's change the word closed for just a second. Let's change the word closed to in limbo. Okay? That is a much more accurate terminology for it, because last meeting that we had here, when the BLM's head guy for Kingman, Havasu, and Yuma was here, he explained to us that those roads at this moment, when we look at them, they're not closed. And when they recommend that we think closed, now wait a minute, it's not closed, it's limbo. And what they're asking us then, look, the green roads, we know you use those things. Those are open. Okay, that's off the table. Now, the red ones over here, if they would say to us those are in limbo, which ones do you use? And then we simply submit to them, well, I use this one. And just like you were saying right there, as soon as you communicate with the BLM, they say, oh, okay. Well, we didn't know anybody was using that thing. And the thing that we've discovered is they're very, very receptive if we can do three things. One, we have to go out there with a GPS or something to record our track. Two, we have to go back and put it on our computer. And then three, we have to send it to the BLM and say, this is one of the trails we use. Now, if it happens to be parallel to another one, we say we use this one because it's on the ridge, it has great views and all that kind of stuff. Or if it's in a wash, we use this one because it's faster and it's not as difficult as the other one. And the thing that the guy from the BLM pointed out last week is that this isn't the final thing. They're going to come back after we give them all our feedback. They're going to come back to us and say, okay, now based on your feedback then, this is our next rendition. And at that point, we're going to have the opportunity again to say, oh, well, now wait a minute. I think this one over here should be open. And at that point, they're going to maybe bring up something that is kind of the trump card for all of us. And that is cultural issues. If they bring up something over here as a cultural issue, the thing that we've discovered in our club is that that's really hard to fight. You follow me? And we can do it. We can do it for 2 or 3 years, but we're not going to win. And so the simplest thing to do is let's work with one over here. Now, to answer your question about mines open, I think the thing we have to realize, all of us that have been in the area now for 5 or 6 years, do you remember the 2 young girls that were riding the quads in the evening up in the chloride area? They were off the trail, off the side. One of them went into a mine, injured, killed, whatever, and so forth. Now, what did they do at that point? They sued the BLM. Okay? Now, they were off the trail. As far as I'm concerned, it was 100% their fault, but that doesn't make any difference. They sued the BLM. Now, what did the BLM do? The BLM won't give a definite answer, but what they did is they had to settle, okay? And if you want to, just examine for a second what percentage of the BLM budget is used for litigation. And that's why they have to be so doggone careful. That's why, for instance, in Havasu, they told us that several of these trails have to be closed. We simply said, well, why? Well, they go too close to a dangerous mine opening, so we're going to close them. And we said, well, now, wait a minute. What if we would fence them? What if we would put up the thing you're talking about, the T-posts, the barbed wire, the sign. What if we would do all that? Well, in the last 8 years, we've fenced over 80 dangerous mine openings. As a matter of fact, the Lake Havasu Club was given a national award from Washington, D.C. for all the mine openings that we fenced. Now, the deal was, if we fence them, you supply the material, we'll supply the people, and we'll fence them. That way they'll be safe. Can you leave the trail open? Yeah, no problem. In other words, instead of just sitting back and whining and saying, why you got to close it, we have to pitch in and help them, okay? Now, you're talking about, why does the BLM have to do this? How many of you are familiar with the Center for Biodiversity down in Tucson? Okay, yeah, I get the kick out of the smile over there. That's a group of lawyers masquerading as an environmental group. And basically what they do is, I'll tell you this, if our BLM, I'll promise you this, if our BLM would come back with alternative A and say, we want to leave basically everything open. Was that the one, everything open? Okay, we want to leave everything open. I promise you that within a month they would have a lawsuit by that outfit, challenging them, tying it up like mad, and so forth. So what they're forced to do, they have to come back with a little bit of a compromise. Now, I fault them for one thing, and that is using the word closed, because that is a red light and everybody goes crazy on that thing. But if they would use the word, like I said, in limbo, and they're in limbo until you can tell us which ones you use. And that's the simple thing right there. GPS it, put it on your computer, convert it to GPX, and then send it to them, and all of a sudden they have a reason to keep it open. In the Wallapies, for over 7 years, we inventoried trails up there for them. We started that in 2012. We turned all of those trails into them. I don't see one single trail on their map right now that they say is closed. We turned them in. That's all there is to it. Okay?
I thank you, and I agree with what you say. The more we do, the more information we provide them, the better we're going to have a better working relationship with them. Anything further on item 2?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. You say you had 7 years, Jim? You had 7 years that you've been working on that with them? BLM? Right. Did that include anybody from Kingman, or were you working with the office down below?
Since 2012, it was all Kingman.
Interesting. Well,
Anything further?
I guess my big concern is the amount of time that we have.
Well, we're going to get to that a little further in the agenda. We have been given a 60-day extension, but further into the agenda, there's an item that addresses that, and hopefully that'll work out for us. Anything else on item 2?
Neil Hastings, 2252 Shadow Canyon Drive, Bullhead City, and I support 100% what Robin Dykstra had said. It was perfect. Option A, don't do anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The thing I kind of question about all of this when we look at options A, B, C, and D is that we have to comment on option C because that's the only option they have available on their computer. And it's the only option that they're looking at. They're not looking at A, B, or D. They're not considering A, B, or D. They're only considering C. So regardless of the fact that they have presented us with 4 options, they don't really exist. There's really only one option, and there's really only one thing for us to work with, and that's Plan C.
Thank you, Commissioner Swatch. I agree with that, and BLM has made it well aware to us that option A is not something that they're going to aggressively look at simply because it does not fulfill what they're trying to do with their travel management plan. If they accept A, they have wasted all their time, and I think the comment was made in our last meeting that they wouldn't get back around to it until 2040. They're not going to do that. So we need to concentrate on what's actually possible and make that work. Anything further on item 2? Real quick, we need to keep moving on.
Just a real quick observation, then what's the point of having option A, B, C, and D if option C has already been chosen? And why are we even, why don't they just throw those out and just say, we're going to do number C?
Chairman Smith, I can answer that. At last meeting, one of our supervisors brought it to the commission's attention that there were 4 alternatives and that we should at least know what the 4 alternatives were that were reviewed by the Bureau of Land Management. And so we brought the 4 alternatives here for the commission as well as the public.
Okay, well, at this point, maybe we should just take A, B, D off the table and start discussing C, because if they're not even realistic, there's no sense in even having them. If that decision's already been made, they shouldn't even be listing them as an option. Otherwise, they'll come back and say, well, we gave you your options, nobody opposed it on A, so we want to go with what we want. And so now we're stuck with C, and we're just getting into the process, and that's my comment on that.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 3, the discussion and possible action, continued review of the Kingman Field Office of Bureau of Land Management Travel Management Plan and existing routes proposed to be closed, and provide recommendations to the Mojave County Board of Supervisors, if any. I think we've started to discuss that already, or have pretty well hit on a lot of the points of that. Any comments?
I want to say that I still feel, even after talking to BLM here last week, I still feel like we get contradictory answers. We're told there won't be any closings. Absolutely, positively, there won't be any closings. But they still, Alternative C still says they're going to close 1,630 miles of trails. So we get another comment period, and we get a chance to go ahead and look this over. But I still can't get past the contradictory information. I also can't get past the fact that the only money spent on any kind of a study was spent on an ecological study, and that no other studies were spent. No engineering studies, no studies about the economic impact, no studies of any kind as far as I'm aware. And Mr. Mack, the head of the BLM for the Colorado River District, said that we should pay the people. The residents should go out and hire people to do these studies if we want them. I found that answer to be unacceptable. That BLM hasn't been. I don't feel the process is transparent at all, and I don't feel like they're listening to anybody but the ecological people.
Chairman Smith, Commissioner Watts, item number 5 on the agenda, we are going to address exactly what you just asked for.
Well, with that information and with what your idea is coming there, Mr. Swats, if we could possibly put that into a motion to put to the Board of Supervisors, asking BLM to expand their study on this before they move forward, would that be an
Chairman
appropriate
Smith,
way?
item number 5, we have that motion.
Okay, we'll wait till we get there. Anything further on item 3? Moving on, item 4, discussion and possible action recommended to the Mojave County Board of Supervisors for recommendation to the Bureau of Land Management, all travel routes to remain open, which are listed to be closed in the Travel Management Plan route designation. That pretty well is exactly what we've been talking about this afternoon. Is there any further discussion on item 4? Yes.
I always say I'm not coming up, and I do. Nancy Wisdom, 10175 North Ambush, Kingman, Arizona. And I just have a comment. I know that Commissioner Wisdom's going to get these, the lat longs of these roads that they're closing so we can actually find them. And is it possible that we can divide this up to where the different clubs, the areas the different clubs are in, present those to the different clubs saying, this little area here, can you send your guys out to look at this? So it's not such an overwhelming, we look at this in a huge area, where as many clubs as we've got, we could divide that up into, somebody could write out 2 or 3 different days and see everything in their little area, and we could really quickly have comments on every road. Just a thought.
Thank you. That's a good thought. And can I refer to Mr. Espel? Is that possible for us to do that with individual clubs through this commission to assign them?
Can you repeat the question? I mean, what exactly?
Okay, she was saying that each club take an area of the map and study that area for comments. And she's asking us to, as I got your comment correctly, you're asking us to possibly assign that to different clubs?
Okay, so clubs can do whatever they wish to do. I mean, they can make their own comments and do their own things, but it will not be authorized on behalf of Mojave County. You will not be speaking on behalf of Mojave County. You do not have the Mojave County's permission to speak on their behalf. So if a club wants to do their own thing and make their own recommendation, you're welcome to do that. We can't stop you. But if you wish to have Mojave County's seal of approval, so to speak, that's going to be coming from the Mojave County Board of Supervisors. What this board here does is it's been commissioned to provide a recommendation to the board, and then the board will decide whether to accept it or not. And if the board says, yep, we agree with that recommendation, then the board will send it on forward to the BLM. So this board does not have permission to say to you that on behalf of Mojave County, you clubs go ahead and do that. This board does not have that authorization to do that. But if the clubs want to do that on their own, you certainly can do it on your own. The Mojave County, nor can any other municipality stop you from doing what you want to do. But it's not going to have our seal of approval. It's not going to be coming. It's not going to be on behalf of Mojave County. Yeah.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Chairman Smith?
Yes.
Okay. I think we're kind of moving a little off track. As I remember it, because the comment period is over at the end of this month, the purpose of today's meeting was to go through those trails and as best we could and make the comments. I mean, it wasn't to expand it. We don't have the time. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Hal, wasn't that the purpose of today?
Supervisor Angus, you are correct. On item number 4 of the agenda, I was hoping to get a list of recommended routes from the commission members that we could tally along with a motion going on as a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to make to the Bureau of Land Management.
And I thought it was interesting, the gentleman who spoke about the word, I think what's kind of tripping everybody up is the word closed, because what I gathered from the meeting last week as well is that is the terminology they use for this part of the process. But they can't get out of this part of the process and then move on and make a decision until these comments come in. And the fact that they've now accepted other than direct trails. Now, didn't Rick Swat say that they're now accepting comments other than just the trail-specific comments? I take that as a good thing. But what I heard was, we're not going to close. It's just part of the process. We need to move on the process in order to get this done for all the other reasons they discussed. So, I hope that is what everyone understood the purpose of today to be. That's it.
Chairman Smith, Supervisor Angus, what the whole purpose we can do is pull up the Google Earth and we could actually do a quick scan over it if any of the members of the commission had certain areas that they did have concerns that they wanted to bring to the attention, that this commission then could forward on to the board.
Well, the board is going to be accepting or rejecting the comments on Monday. So it all has to go into the backup by, I believe, by tomorrow or Friday. Is that correct, Ginny?
Chairman Smith, Supervisor Angus, that is correct. I will need an item with backup no later than tomorrow in order to meet my posting deadlines to get it on your agenda for Monday.
Right. And so that was the reason for this emergency meeting, this special meeting, because of the timeline. And I hope, maybe we can get the extension, but I think that time would be better spent, making sure we get these comments in. That's just my opinion.
Supervisor Angus, this is Hal here. Chairman Smith, if I could add, is the item number 5 is going to be a very important motion that we'll bring to the commission that will go on forward with the recommendation to the board, as well as your recommendation for item number 6 on the agenda was the discussion regarding the request of the 90-day extension.
Right. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Angus. Any other comments on item 4? Then we'll move on to item 5. Oops,
Chairman
excuse
Smith,
me.
I believe Public Works Director Steve Latosky has a comment.
Good afternoon, Chairman Smith, members of the Commission. Steve Latosky, Mojave County Public Works. Just for the information of the Commission and the recap topic that we discussed last week, from a global perspective as it relates to the recreational routes being considered for maintaining to be open, closed, we did put forward to staff some information from the Travel Management Handbook, which we have not seen distinctly identified in the current draft plan, and that is there is I call it a fatal flaw or a shall condition that would drive the closure of any route, and that would be that if it were in a congressionally designated wilderness area. However, the other parameters by which, according to BLM's National Travel Management Handbook, that should be considered under any closures would be 3 things. 1, to protect resources, 2, to promote visitor safety, or 3, to reduce user conflicts. So if the Commission were to consider the closure of multiple recreational trails from a global perspective, they may wish to consider putting out the BLM. What is the basis? If it isn't in a congressionally designated wilderness area, then is it falling under one of these 3 other categories, and why is it falling under? Because staff has not seen that fully described in the travel management plan that has been presented to us for review. So just a perspective in terms of looking at things from a global perspective instead of a trail by trail perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Smith, I did just pass down the handouts. That was handed out last week too. That is from the Public Works Director with regard to the handbook that he just spoke on.
Yes, and it was highlighted in our last meeting. The goal of the TTM process is to create travel networks that are logical and sustainable, as well as meeting the increased diverse transportation access and recreational needs of the public. So yeah, this handbook thing, and I agree with you, it has got a lot of information, but again, we have said that more than once, that the travel management plan doesn't necessarily follow their executive summary and their handbook rules.
Then, Chairman Smith, that being said, then one of the recommendations this commission could make to the Board of Supervisors would be that the Transportation Master Plan be revised to reflect this actual, the H83242 Travel Transportation Handbook Guidelines.
That sounds like a good idea. Anybody want to make a motion to that nature?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion.
You want to clarify that motion?
Chairman Smith, we'd need a construction language. Matter of fact, I think I'd request the Public Works Director, Steve, to, if you have some recommended language, how we could make that motion, that'd be great.
That would be very good because obviously we don't have the expertise to get the language right.
Wait a minute. What was
Possibly.
the third item what was the third item? You gave 3 items there. What was the last one?
Oh, thank you, Chairman Smith, Commissioner Wisdom. There are 3 parameters in the handbook that should drive a consideration of any trail closure, and the 3 items are protect resources, promote visitor safety, or reduce user conflicts. So that's more like I would take it to be the safety of the road user. So if there's an undue safety issue, perhaps like a cliff adjacent to the route, well, maybe that's a consideration. But again, protect resources, promote visitor safety, or reduce user conflicts. And that is a provision under the Transportation Planning Handbook, guidance. So as Commissioner Barton had put forth, that is pretty well eloquently stated motion, if you will, toward just applying the handbook. And if it pleases the Commission, it is actually section 4.C.3 on closure designation in the handbook. So applying, that guidance would at least help, the county and the greater public at understanding the basis by which any closure recommendation is rendered. So I would surmise a motion could possibly be, just to expand on Commissioner Barton's, very concise motion, would be to apply the guidance on closed designation as set forth in the current BLM Travel and Transportation Management Handbook.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'd like a clarification of the motion.
Okay, we need to have a second before we can have discussion, or?
Could you restate the motion?
Mr. Barton?
Yeah, the motion would be that the Public Lands and Recreation Commission will recommend to the Board of Supervisors to recommend to the Bureau of Land Management that H8342, the Travel and Transportation Handbook, be I'd say, Steve, I'd say that they need to be in compliance with the recommended guidelines of the Travel and Transportation Handbook. And then we can add and further recommend to the board that regarding the topic on the closed routes.
Chairman Smith, Commissioner Barton, exactly as you end off the motion, and in particular, consider application of the criteria set forth under closed designation for any recreational routes considered for such recommendation.
Chairman Smith, I can read that too. It's under here. It's under closed, where it says areas where OHV use is prohibited. Areas, roads, and or trails are designated closed if closure to all OHV use is necessary to protect resources, promote visitor safety, or reduce user conflicts.
Those are the 3 parameters you may wish to include in the motion as well. That's right, the handbook guidelines.
But then I would move that our recommendation to the Bureau of Land Management would be that they provide justification for the route closures based on these parameters.
Yeah, perfect. Well said.
Yes. Okay, with all that in mind, we do have the motion on the floor. We have a second.
Yes.
We have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Is there any further discussion?
Chairman Smith, in regards to the item number 4, I would ask, does the commission have any recommendation for routes that they have looked at that they really would like? For example, I took a look at the plan itself, and the area that I live in was actually quite concerned with the number of proposed routes. This is off Blake Ranch Road. I don't know how many people have off-road off there. It's a great area. And so I came up with a list that only took a few minutes of my recommended routes to remain open for recreational purposes. That's how you classified that they were looking for. And I have here H1316, H1320, H1321, and I have about a dozen here. And you can just go through, and then this is the recommendation that the commission would make on to the board, and then they would pass it on to the BLM. These are actual routes that if you go forward with the Transportation Master Plan, we are recommending that these routes remain open due to recreation, or due to remain recreational purposes.
I think that'd be a great recommendation, and I encourage each one of us to do that list. How soon would we need to get that to by tomorrow?
Like tonight.
Tonight. You'd have to do that tonight.
And that was why I could pull it up real quick. I don't want to have a 2-hour meeting today. We can pull it up, the Google Earth that we have set up here, that if the commission wanted to take a quick look at the areas and to give an idea of how to do it, how to use it, we could do that. I would also encourage that for the members of the public here, again, if you have any routes that you really are concerned with, is to go forward and forward your recommendations on to the BLM office, Kingman Field office, with specific routes that you really desire to keep remain open.
I think that would be a fine idea. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do that at this point. And if we do pull that up, then we can get an overview of what you're looking at, and there may be some other areas that some of the others may have. Mr. Ballant?
Jim Bowen again. Hey, could I just make a suggestion? And that is that having been through this many, many, many times, okay, what you're prescribing to do is going to be very, very difficult to all of a sudden look at a great big map and all of a sudden say, well, I think, now wait a minute. What we've got to do is we've got to give them specific routes that we think should be open. And the easiest way in the world to do that is for everybody here. For instance, let me ask you this. Everybody in the room, how many of you have a GPS and GPS your tracks? Okay, we have 1, 2, 3. How many of you put those on a computer and convert them then to GPX format where you can share them with someone else?
Chairman Smith, why don't we bring this up right now, and we'll show you that we can zoom in. You can zoom right in, literally down to where you know exactly what route we're talking about.
Two different situations.
Okay, and then the comment I would ask is that, okay, we zoom in on Blake Ranch Road, for example, all right?
Okay.
I'll show you right here all the ones we've turned in on those. Now, the problem we have right now is the map we're looking at of closed one does not have all the most recent stuff in it. You follow me? And so what's going to happen is I think we're going to discover that an awful lot of the concerns we have are going to be addressed. But if you want to put it up there and do it, the other thing that we've discovered in the past is that if we have a whole bunch of trails and we say these should all be open, that doesn't help the other end of the thing. What we've got to do is we've got to be specific, and we've got to say this one right here is one of our routes. We call it potatoes or whatever, you know. And if we can give it to them specifically, they can do something about it. Because I think it's important for us all to understand there's another step in the process that we're totally leaving out here. And that is, as you mentioned over here, one of the main issues is the environmental impact. How many of us remember in California where they shut down thousands of acres over there because of the what? The turtle, remember?
Desert turtle.
Desert tortoise. And so the thing is that they have to take our recommendations back, and the next step then, we have an advocate in this area. The advocate is Matt, Driscoll. He's the outdoor recreation planner, so he'll be in a meeting with about 8 people, 7 or 8 people. And he will be advocating that these trails stay open because of the feedback that we've given him. What's going to happen then is you're going to have all the different ologists, the bugologist, the boneologist, the rockologist. You're going to have all of those people then that are going to be saying to him, now wait a minute. In other words, it's, in many cases, it's 7 against 1 or 6 against 1. That's why they need something from us. This is the one we want open, and this is why. And then he can answer them. Otherwise, he has nothing in his quiver, and it's 1 against 8. And if you think that our main enemy is the BLM, oh no. Our main challenge are the environmental groups that want to close everything, okay?
Okay. Bearing that in mind, though, I do believe that what Mr. Barton has to put up here will give the whole of us an overview, and he is being very specific with trail numbers that he's going to show us.
Okay, I'll make sure the IT has it set up. I'll go up to the monitor.
Comment. The thing that keeps going through my head is the fact that we have limited amounts of time. If we don't get an extension of a reasonable amount of time, we're then hoping that we can get an audience, which I've already been promised that we would, but for a short period of time to add whatever comments we actually can get out and figure out these roads and actually have some real comments that would be usable in that big meeting that's going to have the environmentalists involved. So I think the whole thing is laying on a crutch of how much time do we really have to get this done. Mr. Bone, you had a number of years to get this. All of a sudden, this has just jumped on us, and then they offer us a very complicated and almost unusable computer system to deal with, and they offer us township maps, and township maps do not work for us. It works fine if they're trying to figure out where a mine ought to be or whatnot, but we need lat longs. I have a promise from Matt Driscoll. He called me Tuesday morning that he is reprinting maps that we can have that will have lat long references on it. But it still is going to take time. So time is probably the most important thing here, is how do we get an extension or somebody to recognize that we've had a ton of miscommunication from BLM from the very beginning of this process. And somehow, I don't know whether we need to make them own up to it or whatnot, but our letter for asking for an extension needs to include the fact that there has been a dramatic miscommunication going on in terms of the real information involved here. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Chairman Smith, Commissioner Wisdom, we're going to be in the item number 6, I believe. We do have the request for extension to have a motion as well from the commission. If we could check on the monitors, Commissioner Smith, you mentioned the Surbat area above chloride, or there's a specific area you wanted to zoom in at?
That gives a good idea of an area that, to me, has a lot of historic value, and it's easily accessible by most all user groups.
Okay. If you look at the GIS map on your monitors, here I'm zooming up right now into chloride. The small little red lines, you can actually zoom right in to them, and those are the actual proposed routes to be closed. You can go on each route and you can actually click on it, and it'll tell you what is the name of the route. It's this, for example, this one I just clicked on is CM 1380. And it's a polyline route, and the description is, the recommendation is to close it. And if you can zoom pretty much all the way in, so most of the off-roaders using Google Earth, and if they've been on these trails, they'd be able to verify by looking at this map that, yes, this is a trail that we have been on. I can zoom out, I can go anywhere within this area of the commission if they have any recommendations on it. If you zoom out a little further and go down to northeast Golden Valley, over here you will see that they have quite a few recommended closures just north of Golden Valley, right in there. Every one of these you can actually click on. It takes you just a second. Here you go. This is like, for example, route number B1628. And these are actual routes that they've been recommending to be closed. Now, the members of the public, they can go on and pretty much make lists and go through the map and verify this is a route that we use for hunting. This is a route that we use for off-roading. This is a route that, we use for recreation, and show that as justification to remain open. And if I may want to just scoot over here up to Wallapai Mountain Park, there was the comment that made by Mr. Bone that they've been working with the Bureau of Land Management to keep routes open. But it's interesting, if I go and zoom in on this here is the community of Pine Lake. You have a small one here that they're H1543, they're recommending closure. If I go ahead and zoom down a little bit as you go down Wallapai Mountain Road, you have another route that's commonly used by actually the mountain bikers use this one, and this is what they're going to do. They recommend to be restricted, limited additional use. Now, when I'm looking off of my area, for example, off of Blake Ranch Road, you can see Blake Ranch Road is the main green line coming down, but you can see probably about 75% of the routes off of Blake Ranch Road, they're recommending to be closed. Now the question I heard behind me, members of the commission, if I could answer that, she asked the question why. In the environmental report, of which Ms. Commissioner Bowen has added, they have the environmental studies that have done. What they have not looked at is the economic impacts, of which item number 5 in the agenda we're going to address.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Any comments regarding what you see on the map? This is on the BLM website. It's real easy to find it. It's a little bit difficult until you get used to it. I don't know, can you bring up the comment box on that screen, or do you have that available?
I don't believe I have that available, Commissioner
Okay,
Smith.
when you do bring this up on your computer, there will be a comment box off to the right of your screen where you can make comments on the route.
And you're going to want to be sure you mention what route it is. When you click on it and where they go and say, like, for example, this one's route 1627, you need to have those specifics.
Yes, once you click on that route and have that new number up there, then it will give you the ability to make comments. And we have 14 days left in this comment period now.
I would encourage the members of the public, especially from Bullhead City, look at the areas around Bullhead City that they are recommended. Here I can zoom in. This is just directly east of Fort Mojave, where you're pretty much looking at the recommended closures of substantially quite a few of the off-road routes and
That
trails.
road just to the north there was Silvercrest, I believe,
No, Silvercrest is going to be north.
or to the north, yes. Yeah, this is right in our backyard, so. Any further comments or questions? One?
It's hard to know how many untold hours and thousands of dollars that the BLM has already spent on all this. There are untold thousands of trails out there. There's no way the public can be expected to go in there and identify every trail that will ever be used or has been used or we would like to use in the future. We're going to have to we just don't have the resources. Many of us don't have the computer savvy to go in here and do all this stuff on the computer. And just unrealistic for the public to have to go in and say, well, we want this specific trail opened up because we ride on it, we're going to ride on it, or we have ridden on it. And I just don't see how that's realistic at all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barton. Anything further on item 4? Moving on to item 5. Discussion and possible action recommended the Mojave County Board of Supervisors for recommendation to Bureau of Land Management regarding the travel management plan's environmental assessment as related to economic impacts to Mojave County.
Okay, Commissioner Smith, members of the commission, this is the one that we really need to take a hard look at. When the Bureau of Land Management did their environmental analysis pursuant to NEPA, it is, our opinion that they really left out a significant impact, and that's the impact that is to Mojave County and to the businesses. So we went and did some research for the commission, and the first thing that we noted is they've not had any studies in some time. In 2002, the Game and Fish, working along with ASU, completed a report that was titled, the economic importance of off-highway vehicle recreation. And in 2003, Arizona State Parks, working with NAU, not W, conducted a study on the economic impacts of OHV. And according to State Parks, the total economic impact to Mojave County, now this is back in 2003, was $219 million. Now what's really interesting is that we did speak with Game and Fish, and they have done a new study. They started in February this year, and they have not yet quite completed it, and we're waiting for the results of that study, which will come out with a lot more findings of what would be the economic impacts for Mojave County. But some of the statistics I'd like to just touch base real quick for the commission that was in the 2003 report was that 26% of all the households in Mojave County are OHV users, whereas the state average is 21%. 11% of all Arizona OHV trip destinations for the past 12 months were to Mojave County. 780,111 OHV recreation days occurred annually in Mojave County, or 6.4% of Arizona's total. Now let's remember, this is the 2003 report. 175,000 OHV days, or 30%, are from other Arizona residents traveling to Mojave County. The number one outdoor activity for OHV is driving on back roads, or the routes. 43% of the off-roaders using this back in 2003 were, ready for this, four-wheel drive pickup trucks. Well, we gotta remember now, this is before even the side-by-side was invented. And a couple little notes here that there have not been any further studies since 2003 until this one that Game and Fish is currently working on. And we all know that OHV has changed dramatically over the last several years. For example, the Yamaha Rhino, which is considered, the first recreational side-by-side, wasn't sold until 2004. And so the EA under 3.16, recreation, as well as the TMP, states that the number of visitors has increased over 700,000 in 2017 from 300,000 in 2005. So that being said, their environmental EA is actually pointing out there has been change, but they did not even address it. So I included also for your just information, some actual charts and pie charts that you can take a look at as terms of that the studies that were done back in 2003, and which it shows that there is a significant amount of economic impacts that comes to Mojave County. Now, this being said, that we have here on Agenda 5 a recommendation for the Public Lands and Recreation Commission to make to the Mojave County Board of Supervisors would be to recommend to the Bureau of Land Management that Section 3.16 and 3.17 of the Draft Environmental Assessment and Travel Management Plan, I threw all the numbers in, I'm not going to read those, be revised to address current OHV economic impacts to Mojave County. Information as utilized under Section 3.16 is 15 years outdated and does not address OHV user groups currently using existing BLM travel routes for recreational purposes. The Recreation Commission further recommends to Mojave County Board of Supervisors for recommendation to the Bureau of Land Management that BLM postpones final EA adoption until the 2018 Game and Fish Study on Economic Importance of Off-Highway Vehicle Recreation is completed and used as an important resource with current information for NEPA compliance.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we adopt Agenda Item 5 recommendation as just read.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to adopt Agenda Item 5 recommendation as read by Mr. Burton and been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any further discussion? Got one hand up?
My name is Larry Reed, 2000 Raymer Road, Lot 22, Bullhead City. I'm probably a little out of order on this, but the one thing you guys really haven't addressed that I think is important, it goes along with the economy. A lot of us were originally classified as snowbirds. We came down here for the outdoor recreation, the sunshine. If you go into Bullhead City along the highway, both sides, you're going to see business after business that addresses us. I came down here as a snowbird. I wound up after 3 years staying. We built our home. My wife and I are retired here. We go out in the desert twice a week riding. And of course, we bought our machine. I put money into that every week. It's an expensive hobby. In our park, well, our club has 22 vehicles in the club itself. In our park, we're retired. I was injured in 2010 and was no longer able to backpack. I love to backpack. The woods were closed to me. But with my side-by-side, I've regained being outdoors again, and I love it. In our park, we have 80 off-road vehicles in the park. We're all senior citizens. A lot of us, we have people 80 years old going out in their side-by-sides. They couldn't do that if they didn't have their off-road vehicle. Oregon and Washington started out with what you're discussing now. And at first it was just a few road closures, and each year they added and added. Now we can't go out and use the trails, the roads for hunting. Washington is really restricted. I was born and raised in Oregon. I spent my entire working career in the state of Washington. My career was in the newspaper field. I'm well aware with what you're talking about and where you're headed. And if you continue with what I'm hearing today, I would say within the next 10 to 15 years, your off-road industry is going to be kaput. That's why we came down here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Smith, if I could respond to that. Let's remember that this is the Bureau of Land Management's transportation master plan, not Mojave County's. And this commission was enacted by the Board of Supervisors for this specific reason as a concern brought by the residents to the board. And I'd also like to add that he's very correct, is that I know for a fact that our snowbird guests at Davis Camp have substantially changed where they're bringing, everyone is bringing their side-by-sides now down with them. And then at that point, they're taken off literally 2 or 3 times a week and to go around. Now, in terms of the economic impacts, that's the exact reason why we just moved on that one motion, was that this environmental assessment needs to address the current impacts that this will bring to Mojave County.
Yes, thank you, and that does sum that up, as we do have a concern with economic, all of the aspects of this travel management plan. Anything further on item 5? Okay, let's move on to item
Chairman? I don't think we've taken a vote on it yet. There was a motion and a second. Was there a vote? Oh, I'm
It
sorry.
was a unanimous vote.
Great.
Thank you, though.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Okay, moving on to new business, item 6. Discussion and possible action regarding to recommend to the Mojave County Board of Supervisors for recommendation to Bureau of Land Management a 90-day extension of time for the travel management plan comment period, which ends on November 30th, 2018.
Chairman Smith, I would request Supervisor Angus on this one, if you feel that item number 5 addressed this, or if you'd like to have a separate motion as well.
What do you think? Hal? Do you think we need a separate one?
Yes, I would like to have a separate one. Just the more we can have the commission recommendations, the board to recommend to the Bureau of Land Management, the better.
Okay, and I don't have with me the backup, so what would be the motion for this one?
It'd be to recommend to the Mojave
Right,
County.
so-
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on, Supervisor Angus.
Oh, okay. So when William Mack was there, he suggested 90 days. He thought that was realistic. And I know that he's already working on it. So that would be the motion, to request a 90-day extension for the comments for the Kingman Travel Management Plan.
Okay. Supervisor Angus, then, as we have here, the motion made by this commission will be to recommend to the Mojave County Board of Supervisors for recommendation to the Bureau of Land Management a 90-day extension time for the travel management plan comment period, which ends on November 30th, 2018.
Correct.
And if you're good with that, I'll make that motion.
Okay, and I'll second it.
Okay, the motion has been made to accept item 6 as written as the recommendation to the Mojave County Board of Supervisors for a recommendation to Bureau of Land Management, a 90-day extension of time for travel management plan comment period, which ends November 30th. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second?
No, Supervisor Angus seconded it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear
I
that. I'm
seconded
kind
it.
of hard of hearing. Well, it's been moved and seconded for a vote. All those in favor signifying by say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Any further discussion on item 6?
Nancy Wisdom again. I just wanted, for people that weren't here last time, I talked to the gentleman that was in charge of BLM, and I asked him specifically, when we send our letter in asking for an extension, do they send that letter up to Washington, D.C., or do they send their own letter saying they've had an extension requested? And he told me that our letter is the one that goes to Washington, D.C. The reason I ask that is because I think in our letter we should specify the reason we're asking for this. And it's, don't want to say incompetence, but the poor way that they set this out for us to do has left us with no alternative but to need an extension. In other words, blame it on the local BLM for not informing us what we needed to know. And I told him that's what we would say. It was good. So anyway, I just...
Chairman Smith, may I address that?
Yes, Supervisor Angus.
Okay, and thank you to this woman for speaking to the BLM, but we are in an extension. They've already granted us an extension that Mojave County requested, so we're in the first extension. This would be the third extension, correct? Is that correct, Hal?
Yes, the first extension was 30 days, then the Kingman Field Office extended it to 60 days, and here we are requesting now 90 days on top of that.
Right, and all these requests happened because of Mojave County, because of you guys, because of all the noise and questions that we had. So when Mr. Mack spoke to us, and he spoke to each of us individually as well, he thought realistically if we requested 90, we might get something like 45. So I just don't want to get anyone's hopes up all that high. We don't know if we'll get it, but we'll just do what we have to do and hope for the best. But he did say they need that letter that has to come from the Board of Supervisors. So that's why, again, that was why the rush of this meeting, and so to get it in front of the board on our Monday meeting.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Angus. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment.
The only question I would ask is this, okay? And that is, we asked for a show of hands, how many of you had turned in things and so forth. In the whole room, there were only about 4. So my question would be this: what are you going to do differently in the next 45 days? Because if we haven't turned in any so far, what are we going to do differently? Because the thing that we've discovered is that while, yes, you can look at this map, and yes, we can show it to our club members and so forth, the challenge is for most people, and all the ones in here that we have that are not using a GPS, we navigate by where the big cactus fell over and the big red rock. That's where we turn. That's our favorite run. And the thing I'm saying is that when the time comes now to be able to communicate with the BLM that this is the one that I want open, you can't use the big cactus and the big red rock. Now, when you try and use the thing that we've got up here, we've had our members look at it and try and say, all right, now your favorite trail, show me where it is on that map. It's almost impossible unless they've got some kind of an electronic device that they can do it with. So I'll end with one thing, and that is that if you haven't been able to submit any so far, what are you going to do differently if we get a 30 or a 60-day extension?
Thank you. I know one thing that I have already started to do is reach out to individuals. You can call me anytime. I will help you with my electronics and with my familiarity of the map. I also know that the BLM office will take appointments in the future for any group. If you don't have the ability to go through the map, Amanda and Matt will help you with negotiating that, and we'll get your comments submitted. So what we really need to do as a group and as the public is to reach out to our friends that don't have maybe the necessary electronics and get going with it. And if we get an extension, that's just even more information we can give them. Anything further?
Well, I can just add to that.
I do.
Whoop,
Hildy?
sorry.
Supervisor Angus?
I'm so sorry, and I'm so sorry I have to be on the phone today as well. I kind of got my days mixed up when we were making this meeting. While we've been in this meeting, I've been texting with Ray Suazo, and he said he's gotten the request. They're seeing how it's going to work with their schedule, and he promised to update me by the end of the week. So we're still going to go and do they need the formal request, but it's in the works. they're trying to see if they can do it.
Thank you, Supervisor Angus.
Chairman Smith, one of the recommendations I'd make as one of Mojave County staff is that this commission then, at that point, with extra time, we could conduct an actual workshop where we could bring everybody in, get the maps out, and really take a very, very serious look at their proposal, and then come up with some concrete recommendations. I understand going out into the field, you could conduct some field. Once you know the certain areas that are really of high importance, then you could conduct with your groups the field trips out to those areas to verify. And that would just probably, we'd have to take it from there and go forward.
That's the kind of specific thing that'll make a difference, right? That's what has to happen.
That sounds like a very good recommendation, and I support that idea completely.
I'd like to make somehow deal with the fact when we send this letter in that your environmental concerns, which is obviously ours as well, the fact that they're working with antiquated information needs to be pointed out. The travel management plan is flawed because of the lack of input on that level.
That is a specific recommendation on going back to item number 5, but that is what the motion is.
Okay.
Okay, any more discussion on that? One more comment.
Seems to me this whole process is being rushed along in a big hurry. There's no doubt in my mind that the BLM has probably spent years putting this plan together and discussing it and figuring out what they want to do themselves without input from us. There's no really reason to hurry this along now. It can be extended. There's a lot of complication things here. A lot of good issues have come up today that haven't been looked at. We're talking 90 days. How long has the BLM spent on this? And now we're saying maybe 45 days. I just don't think all the answers are going to be brought forward in that shorter period of time. And I think it's unrealistic to rush this along, and there's really no reason to do that.
Well, the best answer I have for that, the statute has been written for them to do this travel management plan. Yes, they have been working on it for an extended period of time, but they do have guidelines that they have to follow, and they have given us the latitude to go outside of that time frame already with these extensions. I know from my experience in California, working with the U.S. Forest Service, your comment period was 15 days and that was it. There was never any cooperation. You were done. So they have worked with us well on giving us an additional time, and that is all that we can ask of them at this time. We're not going to make this go away. It's here, it's real, and we need to address it.
Okay, I understand that, and that makes sense to me as well, but is there any reason why we cannot request this to go on beyond that to make the studies complete?
The 90-day extension, Commissioner Smith, that was the recommendation of Supervisor Angus, who has been actually speaking with the state representatives. And that's her recommendation of what she feels that will work, and that's what was brought to this commission.
Is it 90 days, is that an arbitrary number or that somebody came up with, or has somebody realized how much work there is to be done?
Oh, I think that they know how much work needs to be done, but it's just like when they change the speed limit. You got to go by what the sign says.
Well, we the people still would like to have input.
That's what we're here for.
All right, thank you.
Chairman, to answer this gentleman's question, they said that for the next part of the process, there'll be opportunities for comments as well. So if this is not go after this comment period, that's not the absolute end. The next part of the process, you'll be able to make comments as well. Am I correct in that, Hal? Did I hear that correctly last week?
Yes, that was according to the William that spoke last week. He stated that they will be accepting comments. I would only add to that, Supervisor Angus, is that once the EA has been adopted by the Bureau of Land Management and the master plan adopted, yes, we can make comments, but if we're going to revisit proposed routes that then they want to remain open, that they've recommended closure, that would reopen the NEPA process again. And I believe that the Bureau of Land Management wouldn't be very flexible with that one.
Okay.
Would not.
Again, we can only work with the information that we were given, and over and over and over, they were saying that they're not going to close these roads. It sounds like that's the terminology they use, and we can only take what they say, and we have to abide by the limits and the schedule that they have. So if we get it, that would be great. If we get the extension, and I would hope that, I think that a workshop is a great idea, but at some point it's going to come to an end. So we've got to just work as fast as we can and do as much as we can with the limits that we have, and just, that's what's before us. We can't make things happen that the BLM by statute or just by logistics, they're not going to go for.
Thank you, Supervisor Angus.
I like the idea of what Al offered.
Yes.
In terms of, having a big foray here with the maps on the screen and whatnot.
Okay, you need to
You got to address.
address that so all can hear.
Yeah, what you had brought up a minute ago, Mr. Burton, is that your idea of gathering a large group of off-road people, club or no club, to comment on maps that you can display, and we can go in and work on them.
That's if the commission, if we are granted the extension, then we could hold a workshop. Here again, let's remember that the commission, we are the group that has been appointed by the Board of Supervisors to process this. So the commission would hold it. We could take public comments on it, but it'd be up to the commission to make those recommendations. I would also like to add that the one individual that spoke about the time, that is, I would add that this commission came forward quite fast. Yeah. If you remember, the commission just appointed at a board meeting that was less than 30 days ago. We've already had 3 meetings, and we have made some pretty strong headway. Granted, with the 90-day extension, if we are fortunate to grant it, I do believe that we'd be able to come up with some very concrete recommendations to the BLM.
Yes, I agree with that. On my part, the Mojave County staff and the board worked faster than I've ever seen any governmental body in my lifetime of off-roading. A comment there?
I'll get too old, I get stiff when I sit. Like a few of the people here. Mike Kitchen, Kingman, Arizona. Member of Wallapai Four-Wheelers and High Desert Dual Sport Riders. In defense of BLM, which is probably a difficult thing to say, I looked at our first presentation that they provided probably close to 2 years ago when they were asking for comments on these same maps. So it's not like we haven't had a great opportunity to get out, review, and make our comments. I've made a few, but I'll admit that I've been reluctant or procrastinated enough on a lot of them. What I would recommend, Mr. Barton had an excellent idea. I'd like to take that a step, or suggest we take that a step further, in that, as an example, in a first aid class, what's the first thing they teach you? If you're providing first aid to somebody, you don't just yell out to a group of 40 people that are watching, call an ambulance or call 911. You directly assign someone, you call 911. And it gets done. If you just say it, then everybody assumes that someone else is going to do it. Possibly you as the board, the commission, if we have this meeting and this training session, whatever you want to call it, possibly you could delegate people, get their names, and you as a commission again follow up with these people to see what they've come up with on these routes, and maybe
Chairman?
assist them at that level.
Chairman, if I could just jump in here, just to the idea may be good, but we also got to remember the parameters within which this board is commissioned, and also too, just to bring it back to the agenda. We're still on item number 6, and item number 6 is the 90-day extension. And so, as we're talking about these other ideas, that's probably something we could address on item 8, future discussion topics for public lands and recreation.
Actually, I appreciate that, Mr. Esplin, but this does relate to
Extension, a 90-day
the extension because, as was brought up by Mr. Bowen earlier, what's the effect of this extension going to be if we just continue treading water like we have?
So so your argument is that if we were to get a 90-day extension, then we would be able to hold a workshop where we could find a person.
Exactly.
Cool.
And then in that workshop, maybe a bit more delegation of responsibility to people.
Yeah,
Chairman
but
Smith, Ryan, if I could answer to him. One of the first things I'd like to bring up was their time. As Mojave County back in 2017 fall did appoint staff as part of cooperating agency to work with the Bureau of Land Management. I personally attended the workshop that they held down in Mojave High School. One of my staff also attended the workshop they had here up at Kingman. During those workshops, about a year ago, about right now, there was no discussion whatsoever, no maps shown at any proposed routes to be closed. It was not until the master plan came out in August and was distributed for public comment that all of a sudden it was noted that they're proposing 30% of the routes to be closed. That was the first time that staff as well as many of the off-road groups have even heard of that. So in the time frame, we had very little time to respond, and that's when the public then came to the board in September with significant concerns over it. So as far as the time, we haven't had a lot of time to really review the specific routes to be closed. Thus, the 90-day extension would be quite valuable. And judging how fast the Board of Supervisors has been working with this and the recommendations for this commission, I believe that the 90 days, we would make it work.
Okay. I still feel that simply saying these things need to be looked at, we're never going to get anybody to actually go and look at it. Maybe another step higher in delegation to actually get them done. And that's my comment.
Thank you for your recommendation. Anything further on item 6? Okay, moving on to item 7. The discussion and possible action, future discussion topics for public lands and recreation oops, sorry. Jumped ahead. I'm off of the groove. Sorry. Backing up. Discussion and possible action. Explanation of the intergovernmental agreements by Deputy County Attorney Ryan Esplin.
So intergovernmental agreements, if you want to think of a contract, they're just contracts, and instead of contracts between private people, they are contracts between two governmental entities. A common example of an intergovernmental agreement that you see many municipalities do is intergovernmental agreements for law enforcement. So if you were to take the area of Mojave County, in Mojave County you have the Kingman Police Department, you have the Lake Havasu City Fire Department, you have the Bullhead City Fire Department, and you also have the Sheriff's Department. Well, if there's somebody is fleeing, if there's a criminal that's driving through the jurisdiction and they go from one city, they go from Kingman and they go through Mojave County and then they go through into Bullhead City, well, which agency is going to go after what? Well, many times those agencies will have intergovernmental agreements where they work together so that they don't have to answer that question when they are apprehending the fleeing person, because they have an intergovernmental agreement, an agreement where they say, okay, we're going to work together to bring our resources together to do this and go forth. We will do the 911 communications through this person. We will do, this agency will do this. And so they write an agreement where the entities all work together on what it is they're doing, whatever service they're providing to the community. So Mojave County has many intergovernmental agreements with a lot of different governmental entities, with the federal government, with the state of Arizona, with other cities here in Mojave County, even with other cities throughout the state. We have IGAs, or intergovernmental agreements, where we procure services with them, where we decide that we were going to work together on things. So that's the idea behind an IGA, or an intergovernmental agreement. there's a statute 11952 that specifies what the elements are in those intergovernmental agreements. And I'm not going to bore you with what those requirements are, but that's what I have to look through. Whenever I'm looking at an IGA, I have to make sure that those requirements are met. And there are things like, how long they're going to be and what's the purpose of it and who's going to pay for things and that kind of stuff. So in our context, Mojave County can enter into intergovernmental agreements with the BLM for all kinds of different issues, and we do. We have IGAs on the books right now with the BLM and the federal government on various things. So.
And can you explain who can enter into these intergovernmental agreements?
Absolutely, great. I appreciate that. So it's only the municipalities. So it's, in this case, only Mojave County can do it. No other person. I can't do it. Private parties can't do it. It's Mojave County, and that'll be approved by the Board of Supervisors. So the Board of Supervisors says, okay, we are going to agree that Mojave County will enter into this agreement. It's put in front of the Board of Supervisors, and then the Board of Supervisors votes in favor of it, at which point Mojave County would then enter into the agreement with, say, the city of Bullhead City. Bullhead City, the way they would do it is they would put it in front of their city council, they would vote on it, and the city council would give their stamp of approval and say, yep, Bullhead City agrees to it. Otherwise, it'd be chaos if I could try to bind Mojave County or other things by entering into an intergovernmental agreement without the governing body knowing it or having any knowledge of it. Yeah, that's a very important part of it.
Thank you. Any comments on that?
My question and what I was trying to get at, and the reason it's on the agenda, is that I was wondering if there's a possibility that there can be an agreement between the county and the BLM to the administration and future of these trails. Is there a way to do that, or is there a mechanism there that exists that we could have an agreement that they come to us and say, hey, Mojave County, do you mind if we close this road? And Mojave County goes, well, yeah, we don't want that one closed, but we'll let you close this other one. Is that a possibility?
In theory, there could be. I doubt it, though. I imagine that the federal government has probably restrictions on the procedures by which they would enter into intergovernmental agreements for that specific issue. I think the federal government would probably say, no, we have the NEPA process and all these other processes that we have to do, so we cannot just enter into an agreement with a county to say, if we ever want to close a road, we have to get Mojave County's okay first. I doubt that they'd be able to do it. Could we do it? In theory, yes. There can be. You can do intergovernmental agreements for all kinds of things. The possibilities are endless as long as you follow the certain steps and procedures. But in this instance, I think it'd be very unlikely that the federal government, that the BLM would likely want to do that. And in fact, they probably would be prohibited by law to do that, because there's so many requirements, like the NEPA requirements and the notice requirements and the various things that they have to do, that I bet that all those other outside interests would not agree to it, would not allow it. They wouldn't want it. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything further on item number 7? And we'll move on to item 8. The future discussion topics for the Public Lands and Recreation Commission.
Chairman Smith, basically, we put this on the agenda just if we're going to carry this forward, topics for discussion, items that would be brought at the commission level to discuss. We're just looking for input.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Barton. I think one thing that we should get into our agenda for a future meeting is this workshop that you proposed, and figure out a way to facilitate that to where we could get a group of people together and bring up the maps and get that going, and so that we can expand our ability to give valid comments.
I would suggest that would go forward even if we don't get the extension, because they're claiming, both Amanda, Mr. Mack, as well as Mr. Driscoll, have indicated that just because the comment period is ending does not mean that they're turning their back on any future comments. So there's still going to be time. The government doesn't work that fast. This commission does, yeah, but the government generally doesn't work that fast. This is an initial proposal. It still has to go through, they have to work out all the comments that are made, and they're still willing to accept more because they're at a loss of what to do other than to close. They're willing, obviously Mr. Bone brought a lot of that up, they're willing to, take a comment and say, yeah, okay, we'll leave that one open, But, so extension or not, I think we should go forward with this workshop soon.
Comments?
One question, those of you that I ask GPSing this stuff and so forth, how many of you do not have a GPS? Okay. One thing, are you aware of the fact that with your cell phone, okay? Yeah, well, if you don't have a cell phone, you don't belong here, but anyway, no, really. Come on. A smartphone, all right? Every time we get a new smartphone, and the question is, what do we do with the old one? Do we throw it away? Do we give it to the grandkids or whatever? Okay, that smartphone can make a very good GPS. All you have to do is buy the software, whatever it is, for some mapping that you want, either an Apple one or Android one, and then that is what we can be using to submit things to them with, okay? And one of the things that we've done with our club, all right, is when we have workshops and so forth to show them how to use these things, we've had GPS workshops, tablet workshops, cell phone workshops, all that kind of stuff, so that the people can learn how to do it. Then they can come back and they can submit, they can say, oh, this is a really neat road over here. Well, give us a track of it. And they give us a track of it. And the simplest thing I would say to you, just to end here today from my comment point, would be, don't worry about how complicated this thing can be. All you really have to do is make a track of something, put it in a GPX format, that's the exchange format, and then send that to them. That's it. That's all they're asking for at this point. They're asking for any other input that we have of any of these in limbo trails. And then the thing that you were making also, Doug, it's also a living document. We can make changes to this thing for a long time. If we don't agree with something, that's where we really arch our neck and get all the legal stuff together or whatever and go that direction. But it is a living document. This is not the last thing. Okay?
Thank you. Any other comments on that?
I don't know where you ride, but where we ride, we very seldom have a cell phone hookup. I carry mine every time I go out. Our club has 2-3 good GPS trackers in the club. Ignorance is no excuse of the law, I know all that bit, but a lot of us have just in the last 10 days heard about all this, and we're just now trying to get our minds wrapped around it. I run my GPS. I have an excellent one. I have 100,000 trails accessible to me.
Chairman,
I've only been at this for 3 years. I'm just getting into it.
Try not to be rude. I'm trying to jump in, but really, the discussion about the GPS probably ought to go after the meeting. We don't have it agendized. It's not on here. The question here is
give us some time. That's all I'm asking. Give us time to put this together.
Topics. So I would just kind of wrap it up is what I'd recommend you do.
Thank you. Yes.
I've got some things established from what we've talked about today and some from the past. But one of the things that BLM kept reiterating to us, Mr. Mack kept reiterating to us, was that he represents multiple uses and that we're only representing off-roading. And I took his list, their list, BLM's list of multiple uses, and there are 20 of them. And I do 17 of the 20. I don't know how many everybody else does, but out of the 20 multiple uses that BLM has, I do 17, so I think I can speak for some other people as well. And I think most of the members of the commission, and pretty much everybody here, participates in more than one thing, and we're not all one-dimensional like BLM kind of put us in that box. And I'm concerned that because we are confined to this box by the Board of Supervisors and our bylaws, that we need to consider asking the supervisors to expand our responsibility to conclude public lands and recreation in general, rather than just off-road. Because I know I can talk for the photographers, I know I can speak for horseback riders, I know I can speak for campers. I know I can speak for a whole lot of people, and those I can't speak for, I can go out and talk to. So I think we should look at one thing, expanding our responsibility in our area of coverage beyond just off-road. And I think that's something we need to talk about probably as another item somewhere down the road or put on the agenda for another meeting. Another thing that we haven't gotten to is that there is no inventory of 2477 trails. Going back to this old Mining Act, there is no existing inventory of 2477 trails in Mojave County. Without that inventory, BLM cannot go out there and start closing trails willy-nilly until we know what they have. And in Utah, they have blocked that by getting a court injunction. Now, I'm not saying we need to do that, but what I'm saying is we need an inventory of 2477 trails. County hasn't got it, BLM hasn't got it, nobody's got it. Let's inventory 2477 trails in the Kingman District. This is something that they should have paid for in their studies. They paid for an ecology study. It would have been cheaper and easier to pay for a study of 2477 trails. We need to get BLM to work directly with this group as the representative to the county. BLM has tried to circumvent directly working with the county. That's the reason that the County Board of Supervisors was unaware of the proposed closures. They went, and kind of like this whole process has been, it's been a little bit behind the scenes and not really out front where we can all see what's going on. And the County Board of Supervisors did not know that there was a proposal to close these trails. So I think BLM needs to be far more open with the county itself, and I think this commission is the best representative for that group.
If I could just cut you off here on just a couple of things, just to kind of make sure we're on track here. In terms of expanding the purposes of the commission here, what I recommend is talk to your supervisors, talk to your supervisor, and the supervisor can bring it back to the supervisor board to address that item. Secondly, the RS 2477 inventory. I like the idea. I mean, it's my own personal opinion, but the county has a county surveyor. And I hate to give his name, give him more work, but he's a wonderful, excellent surveyor, and I recommend you talk with him because he's actually done a lot of work on 2477 roads, and I think he may have done some inventorying for this particular area. And he does a wonderful job, and he's great to work with, and he was actually here at the last meeting talking about those things.
Could you give me his name, please?
Jason Foose. I apologize to Jason in advance now for giving him more work.
What's his last name?
Jason Foose. So there's that. So I think this board has done a wonderful job. Really, the purpose here today is to give those recommendations to the board, and we've done that. And you know, these additional issues can be addressed at a future meeting. But right now, I think you guys have done a great job of putting it together and putting together some good recommendations. That was really what the purpose of this board was, to give recommendations for this travel management plan to give to the Board of Supervisors so that they can then pass them along the chain.
I did have one more last comment that I want to get out there, and that's that BLM has admitted that they did not go out and look at all these trails and roads. And that the people who did the ecological study admitted they did not go out and look at all these trails and roads. And I've got to wonder how in the hell you can make these judgments without going out and looking at these things.
That's a valid question, but I don't know how we'll get that answered. And thank you, Mr. Esplin. I think that should cover the rest for item 8, unless there's something else. And we can move on to item 9, possible future meeting dates.
Yeah, members of the commission, we put that on the agenda. A lot of this hinges on if the 90-day extension's granted or not.
Yes,
If the
I
90-day
agree.
extension's granted, then the commission's going to, by far, have a lot of work to do. If the extension is not granted, it's the commission, I'm hearing the commission wants to carry forward. So what I'd ask for is the future meeting dates. In the bylaws, it is written as the first Thursday of each month. Being the fact we've already had 3 meetings the last 3 weeks, the next one would be in 2 weeks. We may want to just hold off till after the holidays and then have the first meeting.
Chairman Smith?
Yes, Supervisor Angus.
Yeah, and I think we also want to wait, and so we'll have the motions and the comments that were approved today, and I'd like to see what the board is going to say as well, so we'll know more after Monday.
Yes, I
But I
agree
want to
with
thank
that.
everybody as well, and I think in these last 3 meetings, we really served the purpose that we put this commission together for, and we'll see what happens in the future.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Angus. I agree. And with that, I would say that at this time, we should leave it open for when our next meeting will be held until we have better information and better decisions and advice from the Board of Supervisors.
I agree.
Does that put us into a position where we waste a couple of weeks between meetings because we don't have an agenda for the next meeting?
No,
A meeting can always be put together.
Can you repeat that, Supervisor Angus?
I said we can always call a meeting if need to. We can always call one.
Yes. If we do call a
We need
meeting,
information. We need to hear about the extension. We need to hear what the Board of Supervisors has to say. That's my suggestion, that we wait to see how these two things turn out.
okay, does that answer your question? Thank you, Supervisor Angus.
Okay.
Any
And I've got to
other,
sign off. I'm late for my next meeting, so I think we're almost at the end of the meeting anyway. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see how it goes.
you bet, and thank you for hanging in there with us.
Goodbye. Toby Angus. Has left the conference.
Okay, that covers item 9. Moving on to number 10. Any other commission members' comments?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments I wanted to get out there. I was thinking about the comments about creating workshops or starting workshops. I think that's a good idea, but I'd like to put a little bit different spin on that thing. We actually had a workshop with our Bullhead four-wheelers, and we wound up at BLM with Matt Driscoll. And you could call that a workshop because we went in there and we did not have, we had a lot of GPX files that we discussed with him, and we got it on record what we did with those things. But then he pulled up a map. And even though we didn't have a GPX file on some of these trails we took, there was an interactive session with him, and we were able to comment on these things. And some of these closed trails we got, or they were noticed going to be closed, we got him to change those things with comments. And it was basically a workshop. And Matt Driscoll, he seems to be open to that idea. So in the next 14 days, I would suggest if you have a club, you have some people that are interested in it, and you have some ideas on what you'd like to address with Matt Driscoll, don't be bashful. Get a hold of these guys and See if you can get that done. And another thing you might want to think about doing is if you have club meetings, call up the BLM and say, hey, we've got a club meeting on such and such a date, such and such time. We would like to invite you there. And of course, they might be a little bit defensive at that time, but our experience with that, with the Bullhead four-wheelers, is they will come and they will talk to you and they'll be very candid about what's going on. Matt Driscoll will be anyway. I don't know about everybody else. But yeah, that's an idea. Just think about that. In the next 14 days, be a little bit active in this thing. Go ahead and be proactive and get a hold of the BLM and see if you can sit down with them. And even though you don't have GPX files, try and work with them on a map. That's about what I got to say.
Any other comments from the commission?
When Mr. Mack was here, he did say that we could go in as groups or individuals, and that we could do so even after the comment period is closed, and they will go over the maps with us on the computers. So if you feel like you can't handle the computer or there's something that's preventing you from actually making a comment, you can call over to the Kingman BLM office, and they will actually sit down with you at the computer, and you can point at what you want to point at. And they will accept your comments at that time that way. So they are trying to get open in that way. And then the other thing, of course, is that as the members of the commission here, and then everybody in the audience, if you know someone who's in a group or a club, try to recruit that group or club to get in there and talk to these people.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission? I'd like to entertain a motion that we adjourn the meeting. Been entertained and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.